I think the most important thing is to bear in mind it applies to all new tenancies. There is very, very few ways around it, and you mustn't forget that that means any tenant, however British you might believe they are, still must be checked. It's not just about tenants, it's about anyone you reasonably believe to be occupying the property. And it's important to make sure you're actually seeing all of those people face to face with original documents, not just accepting photocopies. The first thing to bear in mind is that a lettings agent is not responsible for doing the right to rent checks, even on a fully managed service, unless they have specifically agreed in writing that they will do so. Not all lettings agents have or will. So it's very important to check the small print and ask them explicitly in writing, so by an email, if they're actually going to do the checks on your behalf. If they're not, then you need to make sure that you're making arrangements to do those checks before the tenancy agreement is signed. So you're going to have to make an arrangement with your agent, them having shown the property and selected a tenant for you to meet that tenant face to face and do the document check before any agreement is finalised and entered into. So it depends on the agent. Not all agents will take on this responsibility, and landlords need to consider whether they want to pay for an agent who will, or whether they're happy to do that themselves. There's certainly an aspect in which this has a storm in a teacup quality to it. Landlords have often checked identity for tenants. The difficulty, though, is that the Home Office has blown hot and cold on this point. They've said that landlords don't have to do the same level of checking as Border Force, UK Border Force. But there was a recent case involving Ryanair in the High Court, where Ryanair have got themselves out of paying hundreds of thousands of pounds of penalties to the Home Office because two Ryanair ground staff, who also have been told that they're not required to do the same level of checks as Border Force staff, failed to spot Greek passports, which were forged because they didn't have the Hellas piece, which is Greek for Greece, in case anyone's in any doubt, wasn't multicoloured. And because it didn't have, there was a piece of documentary anti-forgery mechanism, which is normally should be done with what's called thermochromic ink. So you touch it and it changes colour because of the heat of your hand. That didn't work, and Ryanair were fined because of that. Now the court said, well, no, that's ridiculous because this is these are documents that in many cases have actually passed UK Border Force personnel. It's not reasonable to expect ground handling agents for airlines to do that. But it's quite clear the Home Office is inconsistent, at least, in its approach to what is an obvious forgery that anyone should spot and what is not. And the difficulty at the moment is landlords have no idea where they're going to fall on that line. And the reality is probably that they'll fall wherever on the line that the particular Home Office person they're dealing with on any day of the week decides they're going to fall, and that is the problem. Well, as you know, the current position is that landlords have to check right to rent and check out and can be given a civil penalty if they don't do so. The future is interesting because there's another immigration bill currently progressing into the House of Lords. It's passed through the Commons, is now in the Lords, and it will probably come into force before the end of 2016. That will make it a criminal offence not to do right to rent checks. The Home Office is saying they'll only use it for people who routinely don't do right to rent checks, but again, no one knows whether they will or not and how it will play out in practice. It also creates significant new powers for landlords to evict occupiers who have failed a right to rent check in certain circumstances. But there's still some way to go there, and we'll have to see exactly how it plays out. But one of the most significant possibilities that is likely to come out of it is a degree of retroactivity in right to rent checks. So at the moment, I only have to check new tenants of new tenancies. It is possible by the end of the year I'll start having to go back on renewals or on some other basis and check my already existing tenants in property, and that will therefore mean potentially an awful lot of work for landlords who have had long-term tenants, and possibly long-term tenants with very poor identification. The best way to keep up to date would certainly be for a landlord to join a landlords association. Clearly I'm going to recommend the Residential Landlords Association, but I should say there are others. But at the same time, the Home Office provides a web page that has guidance documents that are updated. In fact, they were updated just at the beginning of this month, beginning of February. So they will continue to be updated, and that's obviously a good source of information as well, although they are pretty complicated and you might find it a lot easier to join a landlord association and just phone them and ask. But it's certainly an area that remains difficult to keep up to date on, and where the risks are potentially quite high.